Have you ever looked at the person you love and realized you no longer understand each other, even when you're standing just one step apart? Last week here in the United States, my marriage almost fell apart over something painfully simple. I couldn't say what I truly felt, neither in English nor from the heart. This video is the story of how we almost lost each other, and the unexpected moment that pulled us back. The week love shook. Have you ever looked at the person you love and realized you no longer understand each other, even when you're standing just one step apart? Last week here in the United States, my marriage almost fell apart over something painfully simple. I couldn't say what I truly felt, neither in English nor from the heart. This video is the story of how we almost lost each other, and the unexpected moment that pulled us back. Imagine this. You're brushing your teeth on a random Tuesday morning, and suddenly your chest feels heavy, like someone quietly switched off the warmth inside your home. That was me. 1 week ago. In a country that still feels too big, too cold, and too loud some days. My wife walked past me without saying a word. Not anger. Not hatred. Just nothing. And trust me, nothing can be the loudest sound in a marriage. Sometimes love doesn't break with a shout. It breaks with silence that I kept trying to find the right words. Words in English, words in my mother tongue, words in my mind. But everything I rehearsed sounded wrong. When you love someone deeply, the fear of saying the wrong sentence becomes heavier than saying nothing at all. It's funny, isn't it? We spend years trying to improve our English pronunciation, but the real challenge is pronouncing what's happening inside our hearts. And here's the strange part. The moment your relationship shakes, your brain acts like a confused translator. It scrambles your emotions, adds static to every thought, and turns even simple sentences into impossible missions. Psychologists call this the emotional load effect. When your heart is overwhelmed, your language ability, any language, drops. Your brain literally can't form clear sentences because it's too busy trying to protect you. So there I was, sitting on the edge of the bed trying to breathe through the fear that this time, maybe we wouldn't fix it. Maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe we had finally reached the point where two people stopped trying. But something inside whispered, "Not yet." And that tiny whisper became my anchor. It reminded me that love, real love, rarely disappears overnight. It bends, it shakes, it bruises, but it also waits for us to grow brave again. And sometimes that bravery begins with one slow, imperfect sentence. That was the beginning of my week. A week that would test my heart, my marriage, my patience, and even my English. The silent dinner. You know that strange moment when two people share the same room, the same table, the same meal, but not the same world? That was our Tuesday night. A silent dinner so thick it felt like I was chewing on regret instead of food. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill the air. It fills your chest, your throat, your whole body until you feel like you might disappear inside it. The fork clinked on the plate. The refrigerator hummed. A bus went by outside our apartment. Every sound felt louder than our marriage. My wife sat across from me, swirling her spoon through a bowl of soup she wasn't eating. Her eyes looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep, but the tired that comes from carrying an invisible burden for too long. And I wanted to ask her what she was feeling. I wanted to say, talk to me. But my mind, it froze. You'd think after years of learning English, I could at least say one clear sentence at dinner. But nope. My brain said, let's crash now. Good luck. It's wild how your emotional system can override your language system like flipping a switch. Scientists say the amygdala, the fear center, can shut down your verbal ability when you feel threatened. An emotional conflict? Yeah, that counts as a threat. So instead of expressing love or worry or confusion, I just stared at my spoon and prayed she wouldn't see how much my hands were shaking. There was this moment, barely a second, when she looked up. Our eyes met, and it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. She opened her mouth like she might speak, then gently closed it again. And that tiny gesture felt like a whole chapter closing. I tried. I whispered, "Are you okay?" But the words came out too soft, too late, too tangled. She didn't respond. Maybe she didn't hear me. Maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she was waiting for something stronger, something clearer. A sentence that actually meant something. It's strange. In English learning videos, people say, speak slowly, articulate clearly. But nobody tells you how to articulate heartbreak. Nobody teaches you how to pronounce fear. Nobody gives you vocabulary for the moment you're scared the person in front of you is slipping away. Dinner ended with 2 clean plates and 2 exhausted hearts. When she stood up to leave the table, her chair made this long scraping sound across the floor. That sound haunted me. It felt like a line being drawn between us, one I didn't know how to cross. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying the dinner in my mind. I didn't need advanced English. I didn't need big words. I just needed the courage to speak. And courage is always the hardest language to learn. Words that didn't land. Picture this. You're standing in your own living room, trying to fix the most important relationship in your life. And suddenly every word you try to say feels like it was designed by a malfunctioning robot. That was me on Wednesday morning. My wife was sitting on the couch, arms folded, eyes distant. And I thought, okay, this is the moment. Say something. Anything. So I took a breath and whispered the bravest sentence I could manage. I just want us to be okay. Simple, right? Basic English. Soft tone. Clear meaning. But the second the words left my lips, the room felt colder. She blinked once, twice, the way someone blinks when they're trying not to cry. Then she looked away. And my heart dropped. It wasn't that she didn't understand the sentence. It was that she didn't feel it. And that's when it hit me. Language only works when emotion lands with it. I sat down beside her, leaving a careful distance because everything felt fragile. My hands were sweating. My voice felt small. And the fear? Oh, it was loud. Fear has a funny habit of turning grown adults into terrified beginners. Especially in love. Psychologists say when you're deeply stressed, your working memory shrinks. That means even simple sentences feel like juggling knives in a windstorm. My brain was juggling, all right. Badly. I tried again. I'm sorry if I made you feel alone. Silence. A long stretched out silence that made me wish I could rewind time and unsay every mistake of the week. Finally, she said, "It's not about English. It's not about words. Her voice cracked in that way that breaks you in places you didn't know existed. It's about feeling like you're drifting away. And suddenly everything inside me sank. Because that sentence, that one sentence, it was exactly what I'd been feeling too. We weren't fighting each other. We were fighting the distance we didn't know how to name. That I reached for her hand. Slowly, like approaching a sleeping animal. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold on either. A neutral hand is somehow more heartbreaking than an angry one, so I did something strange. Something desperate. Something tiny that I said very softly. Can we talk slowly? Like slow English. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Not amused. Not annoyed. Just surprised. Then she nodded. One small nod that felt like oxygen returning to my lungs. That nod was the first landing point. The first tiny moment where my words didn't crash and burn. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a door, barely open, but open enough. Love doesn't need perfect grammar. It needs presence. And presence often begins with one imperfect sentence you're scared to say. The apology attempt. There's something oddly terrifying about writing an apology instead of saying it. Your brain suddenly becomes a ruthless editor, deleting every sentence that sounds weak, fake, or too dramatic. That was me on Thursday morning. Sitting at the kitchen counter with a notebook open and a cold cup of coffee staring back at me like it knew all my secrets that I tried to speak the night before. I really did. But every time I opened my mouth, fear rearranged the words into something smaller than what I meant. So I decided to write just a few lines, nothing fancy, nothing poetic. Just truth. Slow truth. The kind you whisper, not shout. The first sentence I wrote was messy. I'm sorry. I didn't show up the way you needed. I stared at it for 5 full minutes. Then I rewrote it in English, simple and bare. I'm sorry. I'm learning how to love you better. It wasn't perfect. The grammar was plain. The handwriting was embarrassing. But the message, it was the most honest thing I had put on paper in years. When my wife walked into the kitchen, still wearing that quiet sadness on her face, I froze. My whole body locked up. But somehow my hand moved before my courage did. I slid the notebook across the table toward her. Slowly, like I was pushing a fragile gift that could explode. She hesitated. Then she read it, and something happened, not big, not loud, not magical. Just a tiny shift. Her shoulders softened just a little. Her breath steadied. Her eyes, for the first time all week, actually looked into mine instead of past me. She sat down. And with the softest voice she whispered, "You wrote this for me?" I nodded. Here's the funny part psychologists mention. Written apologies often land better because the brain processes written emotion more slowly, more gently. Spoken words trigger reactions. Written words create reflection. And that morning, reflection was exactly what we both needed. She closed the notebook and held it against her chest. Not hugging it, just holding it like it meant something. Then she said, "Thank you for trying." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a full bridge back to each other. But it was the first time all week she'd acknowledged my effort. An effort in marriage is sometimes the first miracle that I felt my throat tighten. My voice shook when I said, I don't want to lose us. This time the words didn't fall flat. They didn't break. They landed, gently like a leaf finding the ground instead of being blown away. She didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. Her fingers reached across the table and touched mine, just barely, just enough. That tiny touch said more than any sentence I had struggled to say in 2 languages. The moment everything almost fell apart. Last Thursday night in our little apartment in California, something happened that I didn't expect, something I wasn't proud of. We were both tired, work stress, bills piling up, and the pressure of adjusting to life in the US had been boiling quietly between us for days. And then it burst at IT. Started with something small. Too small. The kind of thing couples normally laugh about. She asked me gently, did you forget to send the email again? But I heard it differently. My tired brain twisted her tone into something it wasn't. That I felt criticized, that I felt judged. And instead of breathing, I reacted. Why do you always assume I mess things up? My voice was sharper than I meant. Her face fell immediately. That look, hurt mixed with disbelief, hit me harder than any argument could. She didn't scream. She didn't throw words at me. She just said softly, I'm not your enemy. That sentence, it broke something open inside me. Suddenly the room felt too quiet, too bright, too heavy. That I realized how exhausted we both were. How living in a foreign country, switching between cultures, switching between languages, even switching between versions of ourselves, was wearing us down more than we admitted. And then it hit me even harder. I had misunderstood her tone in English again. Her question wasn't blame. It was concern. But because English isn't my first language, tiny details, intonation, pacing, emotional coloring, sometimes land differently in my mind. That misunderstanding became a fight we didn't need. She sat beside me on the couch, quiet but warm, and said, You're learning. I'm learning. We don't have to get this perfect. My chest loosened. My throat softened. And I said the truth I had been avoiding for days. I'm scared I'm disappointing you in English, in life, in everything. She held my hand at an dramatic music movie script moment. Just 2 tired humans choosing not to give up. And then, almost ironically, she whispered the most healing line of the week. Then let's practice together. Marriage is also a language. In that moment I realized something powerful. Learning English and learning love are the same. You will misunderstand, you will mess up. You will say things wrong, you will hear things wrong. But if you stay, if you show up again, if you try again, you grow. And that is why this week changed me, not because of the fight, but because we chose to rebuild word by word, mistake by mistake, heart to heart. The quiet repair and the language of love. The morning after our argument, the light in the apartment felt different, softer, almost like the world knew we needed a calmer start. She was already up, sitting by the kitchen counter with a mug of tea between her hands. I stood there for a moment, watching her breathe slowly, wondering how many times love gives us second chances without saying a word. I walked over, heart heavy but steady, and whispered, "Can we talk?" She nodded, not with excitement, not with anger, but with a quiet willingness that felt more intimate than any embrace. That we sat together, shoulder to shoulder, saying nothing at first. Sometimes silence is the language you speak when you're both afraid of saying the wrong thing again. And then gently she broke the ice. I want us to understand each other better. Even in English. Those words hit me differently. Not as criticism, but as an invitation. She explained that sometimes she speaks too fast. Sometimes her tone gets sharper when she's tired. Sometimes she forgets English isn't my emotional language yet. And I realized I had never told her how certain English phrases, short, clipped, direct, can feel harsher than they're meant to be. So we did something simple. Something small. Something unexpectedly healing. We practiced. She said the same sentence in 3 different tones. Did you forget to send the email? Once neutral. Once caring. Once frustrated. And I practiced hearing the difference. Then I repeated the same line back to her, practicing my tone in English, something I had never consciously done before. It felt strange at first, but also kind of beautiful. Because suddenly English wasn't just a skill. It was a bridge between 2 hearts trying their best. She touched my hand and laughed softly. See? We're learning a new language. Together. And it hit me. This is what marriage actually is. Not romance, not perfection, not Instagram-level happiness, but 2 people sitting at a kitchen counter at 8 a.m., learning how to talk in a way that feels safe. We made a tiny agreement that morning. When something sounds off, we'll ask, "Did you mean it that way?" Not to accuse, but to confirm. Just like in English listening practice where you pause, repeat, and check meaning, not for correctness but for clarity. And in that moment the heavy space between us finally loosened. Not because we solved everything. Not because we suddenly became fluent in each other's emotions, but because we chose to stay curious. That morning taught me something I'll carry for the rest of my life. You don't fix relationships by avoiding misunderstandings. You fix them by learning to understand again and again and again. Love is repetition. Love is patience. Love is listening, truly listening, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. And just like English, the more you practice it, the more it becomes a part of who you are. When love became my teacher, there's this quiet truth nobody warns you about. The person you love the most will accidentally become your mirror. And sometimes the reflection isn't flattering. A day after our kitchen conversation, I realized something strange. Almost funny, almost painful. I had been treating English like an enemy, the same way I sometimes treated conflict in my marriage. Avoiding it, resenting it, running from it until it chased me back into a corner. It hit me while we were walking to the park. The air was cold enough to bite but soft enough to keep you awake. She slipped her hand into mine, light, almost hesitant, like she was checking if the world had truly calmed down around us. "Tell me something in English," she said suddenly. I laughed. "Like what?" "Something small. Something true." So I said, "I'm trying." Simple. Honest. A sentence English learners overlook because it feels too basic. But that's the thing about basic sentences. They're often the ones you're terrified to say out loud. Her smile told me she heard more than grammar. She heard effort, softness, sincerity. And for the first time I realized English wasn't just a language. It was a way for me to show her that I was still choosing us. Even when things felt fragile while we walked, she told me something that stuck like a quiet seed planted in the back of my mind. When you speak English slowly, I can hear what you really mean. I thought about that sentence all day. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense, not just for English but for life. Speak slowly, listen deeply, mean what you say. Check what you hear. That's basically the curriculum for marriage, and also the curriculum for mastering a language. As we sat on a park bench watching a couple argue across the walkway, hands flying, voices sharp, misunderstandings practically dancing in the air, it struck me again. People don't fall apart because they stop loving each other. They fall apart because they stop translating their hearts into something the other person can understand. And sometimes that translation literally involves English. When we got home that afternoon, she surprised me with a tiny notebook. On the first page she wrote, "Our shared language project." Below that, she drew 2 arrows, one pointing to you learning English, the other pointing to me learning to love you better. It was so simple it almost made me laugh. But it was also so profound it made my chest ache. Because suddenly everything connected, my emotional language, my relationship, my English journey, they were all the same path. And here's the wildest truth. Love isn't the reward you get after becoming fluent. Love is the reason you keep trying. Even when it's messy. Even when you're tired. Even when you feel like quitting. Love makes you want to say things better. And English just happens to be the tool. Courage in the quiet moments. There's a strange kind of bravery nobody ever teaches you about. It doesn't look like standing on a stage or giving a speech or chasing some giant American dream. No, the real courage shows up in the quiet, ordinary moments. Like sitting at the edge of your bed at midnight, rehearsing one English sentence you hope won't disappoint the person you love. Last night, exactly 1 week after everything happened, I found myself doing something I never thought would matter. Practicing the line, "I'm here with you." Silly, right? For words. Elementary level English, but the more I whispered it, the more I realized I had never truly said it. Not in a way that carried weight, not in a way that felt like a promise. When she walked into the room, hair messy, eyes sleepy, wrapped in that old brown sweater she refuses to throw away, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was gentle, like the world finally stopped spinning just long enough for me to breathe. I said it. Slowly. Carefully. "I'm here with you." She smiled in that soft, familiar way. The kind of smile that tells you a week of storms has finally passed. The kind of smile that makes you realize language isn't about words. It's about presence. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You know, I've always understood you. Even before the English." It hit me like a warm wave. All this time I had been afraid of my English holding us back. Afraid she would misunderstand me. Afraid I wasn't enough. But maybe the real misunderstanding was believing love needed perfection to survive. It doesn't. It never has. Love survives because 2 people choose each other again and again. through mispronunciations, bad grammar days, mismatched expectations, slow progress, and all the tiny, unglamorous moments that make up a real life. And that's when everything came full circle. Learning English wasn't just for my career, or my confidence, or some future dream. It was for this. To love better.io express. Better.io stand in the middle of a messy week and say something true without hiding behind silence. Before we went to sleep, she rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "We're getting better, aren't we?" And I knew without hesitation, without fear, without needing to translate anything in my mind, yes, we are. Maybe that's what starting over really means. Not forgetting the past, not pretending the pain didn't happen, but choosing to move forward with clearer words, softer hearts, and a little more patience than yesterday. So here's the truth I learned this week in the United States. It doesn't take loud bravery to change your life. It takes quiet courage. The kind you practice in a new language, in a fragile marriage, and in the small spaces where your heart learns to speak again.